Good Sunday morning, Northeast Ohio, on this 19th day of April. Today marks the 25th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. I bring it up because it marked at the time for many of us what we thought would be a generation-defining where were you moment, not knowing the once-in-a-lifetime event we'd be living through a quarter century later. For Governor Mike DeWine, this is a weekend off away from those 2 o'clock press conferences. The governor taking a break to meet with leaders across many sectors to determine how to proceed towards a May 1st partial reopening. Governor Mike DeWine promising that the plan they come up with over the weekend will balance Ohio's health and economy, gradually reintroducing commerce while monitoring its impact.
This is not going to be a walk out and, open the door and we're all back to where we were, because we can't go back to where we were. We can't go back to where we were until this monster leaves our state.
While Ohio is partnering with 6 other Midwestern states, the governor stressed ours will be a plan by Ohioans for Ohioans. But Health Director Dr. Amy Acton stressed will offer a phased approach.
So I do hope no one at home thinks like it's wide open May 1st, going back to life as normal. It's really hard to hear that, but we are not going back to 6 months ago. That's not the reality we all face.
Meanwhile, in the new Van Aken district of Shaker Heights, time was suspended a month ago when the state's shutdown orders were announced. Businesses sit poised and ready for the play button to be hit again. The reality is many of the shops here are prime examples of the types that could easily reopen, catering to a specific audience of shoppers, not masses, where social distancing is easily achieved. Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose calls his office the front door for new businesses. And believe it or not, he says, there's been a healthy number of people knocking.
We expected that we would see a large drop-off in new business formations, and actually that's not bearing out to be true.
DeWine's a fan of the light switch analogy. The economy may have turned off with a flip of the switch, but to turn it back on, we're going to need to use a dimmer, slowly, gradually. To be clear, there is a tug-of-war going on here, from the political pressure on one side to reopen the economy versus the health concerns of moving too fast. To this point, Governor DeWine has been able to balance the two, something we explored this week in Columbus. Outside the State House, they've gathered sporadically in recent days, marching in protest against Governor Mike DeWine and in favor of reopening the state. In last month's Baldwin Wallace Great Lakes poll, Governor DeWine's approval for the handling of the coronavirus crisis was nearly 80%. And News 5's political analyst Dr. Tom Sutton says he doesn't see that changing.
No, I really don't think so. When we look at public opinion polling nationally and in Ohio, there's still a majority that do believe that these stay-at-home orders are necessary to keep us safe and healthy. We did have some of that protest involving candidates for legislative office.
So that aspect of this is an example of why historian John Meacham has called this a partisan pandemic, where the facts and data you believe depends greatly upon where you live and the channels you watch. So the more of a push there is from the president to reopen the economy, the more of a pushback there will be by some against the governors who don't.
Absolutely. And we saw that in the last 48 hours, where President Trump said that he had the power to determine whether to reopen or not. And governors disagreed, including Governor DeWine.
Senator Rob Portman telling me if you think it's either Washington or your governor that will determine when everything truly reopens, well, you'd be wrong on both counts.
I think the people are going to determine it. You're not going to be able to tell a mom or a dad when it's time to send their kid back to school. They're going to decide when it's safe. You're not going to be able to tell you or me when to go back to a restaurant. We're going to decide when it's safe. So I think the key here is not so much elected officials choosing a date as providing the criteria for people to know it's safe.
As we said, there are 2 wars being waged here, on the healthcare front and the economic one. On the latter, it is the banking system that will come to the aid of businesses large and small, and it is the Fed that will have their back. On a given day in normal times, hundreds of people walk by the Cleveland Federal Reserve at Superior and East 6 without a second thought to what sits inside or the work that is done there. On this day, they are helping to build a bridge, one that they hope will safely carry the economy over this economic crisis to the point where it can land safe and functional on the other side.
Now, of course, right, this is a very, very hugely negative shock to the economy, and there is going to be damage, but we're trying to do our best at the Fed, working with Treasury to make sure that the financial markets stay sound and credit flows to households and businesses that need it.
Loretta Messer is president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. While she's seen the headlines in regards to the delays of the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program, as well as the issues with the small business loan programs that focus their attention at the Fed on what they can control, which includes helping to ease regulatory restrictions on banks who can then provide help on the front lines.
So you're right, there is some issue about the money getting to the small businesses. One of the things the Fed did do is, again, to try to support that PPP program, is to do a PPP facility where we're adding liquidity. So again, enabling the banks, right, to do more of that lending.
The Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland is one of 12 such banks in the reserve system, covering Ohio and parts of 3 surrounding states. Messer says the impact here is no different than what was seen elsewhere in the country. She believes, though, that because the economy was sound going into this, there will be a foundation for it coming out.
This is different, and the recovery is going to look different as well. I think it'll take some time for that to come back, but I do believe it will come back.
A pilot once told me that every landing is a controlled crash. How controlled it is determines or not whether there's any damage to the aircraft. Well, the crash of the economy was, in a sense, a controlled crash. It was paused on purpose. Now the Fed is looking at how to restart it while minimizing that damage. With Democracy 2020, I'm John Kosich. Enjoy your Sunday. Stay safe.